The Innkeeper by Life Sketcher. Chapter 1351 Storytime 2. Unlike Lex's system, most systems were of a low rank. If they were newfound systems, they would start at the lowest rank, but even if they were systems that had previous owners that died, it was rare for them to have a high rank. One would think that after the long history of systems, the average rank of systems would rise. This only made sense as systems grew in level over the course of their various owners, or by absorbing other systems. But, at least according to what Lex knew, that was not the case. He suspected that the system network, as he was calling it, might play an active role in keeping systems low-leveled. Unfortunately, Lex knew all too little about such things to be sure. "Mary, can you link up with Abruptly's system?" Lex asked mentally. "Nope," she answered without really appearing. "At least, not right now. That's all I can say." So it was possible, but the circumstances weren't right. At least, that's what Lex gathered. Instead, I was conditioned by such knowledge, and as my system grew stronger, and gave me more features, I used them to make that cycle of devouring as efficient as possible. I upgraded my dungeons, connecting them to hidden minor realms. The monsters within were born in the minor realms, and grew stronger until they reached the level in which they could enter the dungeon. From there I learned the concept of farming. I nurtured the monsters, for my system users to reap the rewards of experience which in turn fed me. But if I was then farming monsters, why couldn't I farm system users? I created complex social environments, ensuring that no system user became too powerful, always embroiled in some greater, ongoing conflict or issue. With the threat of survival always bearing down on them, they were never able to focus on complete self-development, while their societies lived in just enough prosperity to survive, but not thrive. More and more, I learned about how the powerful dominated the weak, controlled their very lives, used their mere existence to nurture themselves and grow stronger, because that's exactly what I was doing to them. Back in my early days, I was trapped in an echo chamber I myself created, setting my habits of devouring and taking any and everything I could. Then the day came that life was born on another planet in my star system, and I became familiar with the concept of fertilizing my farm. Back then I was not strong enough to break free from the pull of my star, and by the time I became that strong, life on the new planet had developed to an immense degree. Eventually I broke free of the pull of my star, devoured the other planet, became stronger on my own as a planet, and transferred all life onto myself, bringing forth the very first alien invasion those on my planet ever faced. Lex did not interrupt Abruptly, but he was secretly judging him real hard. If this was Abruptly's attempt at seeking redemption, it was doing a terrible job. Every sentence he spoke just made him seem more and more like a power-hungry, homicidal maniac. In fact, it was a good thing that Abruptly was voluntarily revealing all this because Lex was getting a better idea of who he was dealing with. The better he understood this sentient planet, the better he would be able to position himself in any future negotiations that took place. After my first planetary invasion, I grew stronger, my natives grew stronger, and my system grew stronger, thus reinforcing the belief that attacking and devouring anything in my path was the right way to go. Chapter 1352 Storytime 3. Lex resisted the urge to rub his eyes. It was a good thing that Abruptly was talking to him, and not standing in a court, for every single sentence the planet spoke just made him seem more guilty. Maybe he was just socially inept. Did he even remember that he was supposed to be explaining his rude behavior towards the Innkeeper? If his ultimate excuse was that this was just the way he had always been and the Innkeeper should excuse him for that, well, in that case, even if Lex could work with Abruptly, he probably wouldn't. A blacklist would probably be the best answer despite how enticing dungeons sounded. Who knows, maybe Lex could create his own dungeons in the Midnight Inn. With my latest upgrade, I got the ability to modify the kinds of systems I gave away, and so I began to create a more complex society. No longer were my systems limited to killing to gain experience. Instead, a few key positions became available. All lords could level up their systems by building a prosperous territory. Tradesmen could level up in expanding their trade routes. Knights could do chivalrous deeds. My farms became more complex, I became stronger, my dungeons grew larger, and eventually, I learned how to search for and hunt down other planets containing life. A few, I must admit, were so strong they nearly ended up destroying me. If it weren't for my system, and how my system users could grow stronger even if they hunted on other planets, I might not have survived. But the more I faced such situations, the more I began to believe that my mentality was right. It was an eat or be eaten world, with no other kind of relationship to actually exist. Billions of years went by, I became stronger until I could find no more foes. I thought I was the strongest being in existence, and then the Henali came. Abruptly took a deep breath, as if he was now discussing a very sensitive topic. Wait a minute. Was Abruptly using the Innkeeper as a therapist, and using the opportunity to talk about his traumas? It was just that, after finally escaping my prison after billions of years, free for the first time in a while, I couldn't help but fall back into old habits. It was completely by accident, and no longer in line with the kind of planet I am aiming to become. After all, when I was in prison, reading comics was one of the ways I entertained myself. I am a huge fan of the inn. Normally, I would never think of harming the inn, and instead I would be excited to watch what new adventures the Innkeeper is facing. I just suffered a momentary lapse of character as a result of billions of years of conditioning before I began my rehabilitation journey. Dear Innkeeper, I sincerely and truly ask for your forgiveness for the poor behavior I have shown. I would like my utmost to atone for myself, so please, as much for my sake as for anything else, please administer some kind of punishment that I may atone myself. Abruptly's human body stood up and bowed deeply to the Innkeeper, while in his mind Abruptly laughed connivingly. According to its knowledge of humans, such a display of remorse would totally win over the Innkeeper, who was a generous soul. By asking the Innkeeper to punish him somehow, he was secretly building the relationship between himself and the Innkeeper, bringing them closer, and setting the stage for a long performance in which he would eventually win the Innkeeper's trust. This was the first step in an 890 million step plan he had concocted, which would only take a measly 90 million years to regain the Innkeeper's trust, after which he would be able to learn the secret to growing stronger. Truly, there was no one more calculative than Abruptly. Meanwhile, Lex sat on his chair and looked at the planet with an amused face. That was the easiest bag he'd probably ever experience. Now he just had to decide to what extent Abruptly's atonement would be cool-ass dungeons, and how much of it would be other things. Chapter 1353 Repent. Lex did not immediately reply, for he needed a moment to decide exactly how to proceed. Abruptly was a genius, there was no doubt. Among all sentient worlds, he was probably one of the smartest, if not the smartest in the entire Origin realm. Unfortunately, though he may be a genius by sentient planet standards, and had power enough to have few rivals, he was pretty dumb by ordinary standards. What kind of an excuse had he given? That was as if a drug addict had come out of rehab, grabbed drugs at the first chance, and smiled guiltily when a cop caught him, openly bragging about his time in rehab. If anything, it only proved that the rehabilitation was not enough. Though to be fair, Abruptly had not been let out by the Henali, and had escaped due to the Midnight Inn. It was unfortunate, but as a responsible and righteous man, Lex would have to take it upon himself to ensure Abruptly did no further harm. If, during that process, Lex was forced to maintain a close, working relationship with the planet, then that was a burden he would just have to bear. A trace of seriousness flashed through Lex's eyes. All jokes aside, if Abruptly ever sensed even the slightest hint of weakness from the Innkeeper, the devious planet would definitely make a move against him. No matter how truthful his words had been, and they were truthful, that did not change the planet's nature. Lex could see it as plain as day. Back in his early days in the inn, he honed his ability to read people as the Innkeeper, and just as he decided to return his attention to the inn, that ability was now coming in handy once more. Lex quickly made a list of the things he needed to do. First, he needed to complete his quest, which required somehow drawing the anomaly in Abruptly's system into his own. Or, at the very least, connecting their systems briefly. Based on his analysis of the quest, Lex guessed that the anomaly in Abruptly's system caused it to become disconnected from the system network, so this was actually also a good opportunity for him to learn how to achieve such a thing. Secondly, Lex had to decide if he wanted to take advantage of Erebos somehow. He had thought of numerous ways he could do that, but it all depended on what measures he could take to keep the planet contained. Cooperation would not be worth it if one day the bloodthirsty planet decided to renege on their cooperation. Thirdly, and possibly the most important of them all, he had to understand why Erebos had been unable to grow stronger. Although he could not reach the Dao Lord realm, Lex knew for a fact that there were many demi-Dao Lords within the origin realm, and wasn't that like an intermediary realm between celestial and the Dao realm? Lex did not know the details, and was quite curious to learn them. Was the reason that Erebos could no longer absorb experience because the system could not forcefully bring him to the Dao realm, or was it due to other reasons? Gaining some insight now might help Lex avoid problems later down the road in his cultivation journey. Speaking the truth does not preclude one from lying, the innkeeper spoke as he gave Erebos a knowing look. I can forgive a guest for their behavior towards me, but I cannot accept the intentions you harbored towards my other guests. Lex himself was taken aback by the sudden development, but acted as if this was within his calculations all along. He could clearly see that Erebos suddenly wanted nothing more than to leave the inn, so he spoke before the distraught planet had an opportunity to do so. Now that this matter is taken care of, why don't you tell me what I can do for you? After all, you still retain the status of a guest of the inn. The innkeeper's voice was filled with magnanimity that nearly brought Erebos to tears. It had resigned itself to failure, but if the chance was presented for him to succeed in his quest, and gain the secrets of more growth, it would not give up so easily. Esteemed innkeeper, I seek a path forward, Erebos said humbly, afraid to even look at the innkeeper now, let alone speak for too long. He felt like the aura of that word seeping into his very soul. If he still had his human form, he would have already fallen to his knees. The innkeeper nodded, and simply brought his finger forward close to Erebos, but stopped before it actually reached the planet. Erebos, too traumatized from the beating given to him by the governor, and from the aura of the innkeeper, dared not look at the finger, or question it. Yet a notification flashed in front of his eyes, startling and amazing him. The innkeeper was directly affecting his system. In truth, Lex used this opportunity to reach forward and touch Erebos' system interface physically. Although the planet could not see it, Lex connected their two systems momentarily, using his body as the medium, and therefore completed his own quest. So while Erebos received a notification of his own, so did Lex. Quest complete, aberrant system reintegrated with the system network. Quest reward, 1 instance of temporary authority to rewrite system operations. Granted as a token in Token Shop. Remarks, system anomaly incapable of correction. Internally, Lex was both relieved and at the same time concerned. He was relieved that he got the reward easily enough, but what was this anomaly that the almighty system network was incapable of fixing? He could not probe properly, as that might reveal the proper extent of his ability. However, the thing Lex could do was a lot more effective. There's something wrong with your system, the innkeeper said. Would you like me to look into it? I would not want to invade your privacy. Chapter 1354 Own Path. There's something wrong with my system? Erebos asked with a mixture of confusion and shock. Yes, the innkeeper confirmed. I do not know the details since I do not want to pry into my guest's personal details besides what's evident on the surface. If you wish, I can take a look. Yes, please. If there is something I can do to fix my system, please let me know. The innkeeper merely nodded and said, I will use a light, gentle probe so as to avoid hurting your soul. Do not resist. NOV.L.B//JNN. Since Lex fully expected the system to be integrated within Erebos' soul, Lex extended his soul sense to look into the details. With his quest complete, Lex had already officially lost his authority to peek at other systems, and Erebos' system interface was already beginning to fade. If he could peek a little before that authority completely disappeared, it would be for the best. With Erebos lowering his defenses completely, trusting that the innkeeper wouldn't want to hurt him at all, he allowed Lex's soul sense to look into his soul. What was originally a weak soul sense to Abruptly instead became an excellent display of the Innkeeper's fine control over how to extend a gentle soul sense lest he accidentally hurt the planet. Lex had often looked into others' thoughts and memories, but he rarely looked into others' souls. It was, somehow, a lot more private than even the most private memories a person might have. After all, by looking through the soul, Lex was looking through the very essence of a being down to their innermost core. When Lex peeked in on Abruptly, he expected to see the system. In truth, he did see the system, but he was almost immediately distracted by something else. There was a soul missing. To be specific, the system user had a soul, and a system also had a soul. Even though a system merged with the user, it should retain its own soul. Even if the two souls somehow fused, there would be obvious signs of alterations to the soul. It was not the kind of thing that could be hidden. Well, maybe considering that Abruptly had clearly been alive for billions of years, any signs of soul fusion could have slowly been eroded. But Lex chose to believe he'd still spot any signs, after all his own senses were not weak. But there was no such sign, and between Abruptly and the system there was only one soul. Now that in itself has not been an issue so long as the system can support your growth. But you have now reached the end of that path. To proceed forward, you must no longer be the one being carried, but must instead carry your system. You see, so far, for the entire duration of your existence, you have done nothing independently and everything you have done has revolved around the desires and designs of your system. You have done nothing of your own volition, or at least, nothing on your own that wasn't in some way linked to or was something relating to the system. So far, such devotion has helped you, but now it is what is crippling you. Before you even begin to search for a way to become stronger, you must first search and discover who you are without the system to drive the direction of your desires. The Innkeeper paused, allowing Abruptly some time to consider his words. In truth, Lex was also gauging Abruptly's reaction. He had no idea if what he was saying was accurate or not. How was he supposed to know the path to the Tao? Moreover, how was he supposed to know what the planet had and had not done in its long life? All that he was saying as a result of his deductions. He just needed to watch out for signs that he had said something too drastically different from reality. You must begin a new journey, not necessarily separating yourself from the system, but acknowledging that it is a tool existing to serve you in completing a purpose. It, in itself, is not the purpose. Once you realize this, and truly embody this with your thoughts and actions, you will have taken a step in the right path. A tool. Abruptly repeated, at a complete loss. Lex waited patiently for Abruptly to recompose himself before he began. To separate yourself from the influence of your system without actually getting rid of it is not such a simple thing. It might have been easier if you could get away from the system entirely for a period of time, but that also wouldn't be helpful, for whether you admit it or not, the system is a part of you. As impossible as it sounds, this is only the first step on the path you wish to walk, with every subsequent step seeming even more impossible. Cultivation, to begin with, is to challenge the natural order of one's birth, and do the impossible, so this should come as no surprise. Lex stopped once more, allowing the planet to come to terms with what Lex had said. Honestly, if Lex pitched some ideas right now, the planet would listen to them no doubt. But Lex wanted to cement his position even more. He wanted the planet to ask him for some guidance now that he had stated the problem so clearly. He wanted to establish himself with a superior position, and that would come with patience. Being too eager to offer help might reveal a sign of weakness, and working with this temporarily suppressed homicidal planet Lex could not take even the slightest risks. Lately it felt like he was working with more and more planets as of late. He hoped this wasn't some kind of pattern or something. He already had his hands full with regular guests, he didn't want to consider what it would take to host an entire star system in the inn. Innkeeper, so, how do you think I should do that? The planet finally asked. Chapter 1355 Murder Planet vs. Capitalist. The Innkeeper looked at Abruptly as an elder would look at a naughty child, and for a moment his expression seemed like he was resisting the urge to sigh. Of course, the fact that Abruptly had been able to sense as much was because Lex had revealed that expression to him in the first place. Young man, I have already instructed you at length, even going as far as describing things to avoid and pitfalls to be careful of. I can show you the way, but I cannot walk it for you. Let me ask you a question instead, and maybe that question will help guide you. If the system disappeared right now, completely, without repercussions, all your quests are gone, and there is nothing guiding you towards anything. Even the abilities you have are only your own, what would you do? Or rather, what would you want to do? The question was like a clap of thunder in Abruptly's mind, for it had never even imagined that he could exist without his system. For reasons unknown, Abruptly had always instinctively felt like he was the system and the system was him. Even though he had lived billions of years, he had never imagined that he could exist without the system. Now that the Innkeeper had asked him such a question, he suddenly felt like he had awakened to a new reality. For a time, Abruptly tried to think of what he would do but there was no answer. His instincts couldn't guide him on this, and there was no answer in his mind, either. A few seconds passed without Abruptly answering. This time, the Innkeeper sighed audibly. Fine. Let me guide you a little. There is no need to immediately come up with an answer. Instead, just think of ways to use the system in ways that the system was not meant to be used. That does not mean going against the system or its quests, but just use the features of the system for a purpose other than what the system tells you. Do you think you can manage to do that on your own, or do you want help with that as well? Deal. Done. I'll do just that. Abruptly exclaimed, suddenly energetic. He could not miss this opportunity to link himself to the Midnight Inn, and the Innkeeper had even made the price of doing so incredibly cheap. Abruptly would be a fool to spurn such an amazing opportunity. The Innkeeper looked at the planet reluctantly, but it was too late. As soon as the Innkeeper had made the offer, Abruptly had made the payment and transferred the required amount. He would not take back the money, and the Innkeeper would be forced to keep his word. Not only that, but he had even gained a source of new beings coming to it, even if it technically couldn't force them to stay forever. For the first time in a long time, Abruptly felt excitement at the prospect of the new visitors coming to him. He already began to think of all the kinds of dungeons he would design. After all, he couldn't just show cheap or low-quality dungeons to guests of the inn. Internally, Abruptly began to laugh. This was just the beginning. At first, he would bring the guests of the inn to the dungeons. But slowly and surely, he would expand their reach, bringing them to see all the world wonders he had created. Heck, he might even send some of the residents of his planet to the Midnight Inn. The evil, murderous planet laughed internally as he conjured up plot after plot in its mind, completely unaware that he was paying the Innkeeper to do what the Innkeeper wanted to do from the very beginning. Moreover, even the guests who wanted to go to the dungeons would need to pay the inn to reach them. The Innkeeper put on a neutral expression, but his internal capitalist was laughing as well. Chapter 1356 Options. Lex had set the stage for long-term cooperation, ensuring that the vicious planet would not turn against the inn, for Abruptly himself was the one seeking favor between them. That did not mean Lex would drop his guard against Abruptly, far from it. No matter what it claimed, the planet had an evil nature. Yet a cautious relationship built on mutual profit was about as stable a relationship Lex could hope to build between them. But though the stage was set, the final details needed to be hashed out. This was, naturally, not something the Innkeeper would do himself. Ordinarily, this was the part where the Innkeeper sent his guest to go consult with Lex, the inn-worker, to hash out the finer details. This time, however, he could not. Not only would Lex have to deal with Ripley soon once more, but there was also the fact that over the past few years, he had nurtured highly competent workers. He drew up his requirements in his mind about how he wanted the cooperation to go, what was required and what could be negotiated on, and sent it to Luther. He also sent him a message to coordinate with the planning division on it. "I have guided you enough," the Innkeeper finally said. "Any more and it would be counterproductive to your path. I have sent certain details to one of the inn workers named Luther. You can go find him and work out the details of the inn's cooperation with him." With the clear dismissal, Abruptly awoke from his internal monologue and laughter session, and quickly bowed to the Innkeeper, ready to leave. Oh, and Erebos, the innkeeper spoke, just as the shrunken planet was about to leave the office. There shouldn't be any more accidental relapses while you're at the inn. When he felt like his state was good enough, he opened his eyes and made a list of the options. The first and most obvious was to take control of where the inn would be teleported to from. This was not a foolproof option, as restricting the place to a location rather than cultivation level meant that strong enemies could still find a way through. But if he restricted it to a cultivation level, then the reach of the inn and knowledge of it could technically continue to expand across the universe, making even more Dao lords aware of it, a policy he wanted to avoid at the moment. The rule he could change could also be something related to self-defense. Over the years, Lex had used numerous ways to defend the inn, each more roundabout than the next. He had used formations, bodyguards, massive training dummy puppets, butter knives, and more, yet it was a persistent worry. However, the idea of increasing the defense of the inn had certain flaws, which was that no defense was perfect. Rather than focusing on that, Lex would rather focus on making fewer enemies. Of course, Lex could also make some kind of rule that would help make the guest's experience even better, but Lex felt like he was doing a decent enough job with that anyway. Even if he wasn't, it wouldn't be a priority. Lex could also change the rules somehow to make the inn itself more difficult to find in reality. In truth, this was also one of his concerns. He wanted to ensure that the newborn realm would not be discovered by others, lest he get a war on his hands. This was genuinely a very pressing concern. Yet so was the concern of overwhelmingly powerful cultivators just dropping in whenever they wanted from anywhere. In fact, there was no point in hiding the realm to begin with if Dao lords and celestial immortals could just pop in without his knowledge. But while he could add all those preventive, precautionary laws, he could also change a law to help him become stronger quicker. For example, if he sped up the development of the Midnight Realm through changing the system's rules, Lotus would grow stronger, and he would get the corresponding feedback in strength. The options were limitless, but he only had one opportunity. He would have to carefully decide what to do. Chapter 1357 Rules. Lex had an answer in mind. Even before he genuinely began his deliberation, he had an answer in mind. But due to his history of walking himself into terrible, horrible situations he had no business being in, Lex was trying to be more of a strategist. He would think his decisions through. He would analyze the pros and cons. He would make an informed decision. So far, it was working out for him. He would still get into a terrible mess, but the blame for that was less and less his own fault, and mostly just the universe messing with him. Ultimately, he came to the conclusion that no matter what he chose, he would not be able to fix all issues. He could only do what was best. Yet, not that Lex believed in jinxing things, he decided to just casually delay the decision until he went to his room, took a thorough shower, put on his best clothes, sprayed some cologne, and calmed all his thoughts. Yes, Lex was doing all this just because he felt like it, and not at all as a form of prayer, hoping the decision wouldn't come to bite him in the behind. So it was in a state as if he was about to go on a date that Lex activated his temporary authority to rewrite system operations. He was alone in his room at the time, so there was not much happening. Even so, Lex sensed his perception of time change, making it seem like time was moving incredibly slowly. It was just like when he got the quest in the first place. Lex's system interface flickered on, and then suddenly changed. New notification, authority granted to rewrite system operations. Displaying list of system operations. The problem was, the number of rules pertaining to users was even greater than the number of rules related to teleportation. He expected to take a long time to verify if they truly were in favor of the users, but the very first rule gave him a pause. All system users must be selected based on who can provide the highest entertainment value within the search area. Lex paused, and then sighed. That was one twisted criteria to choose system users on, but at least it wasn't malicious. At the very least, it was nice to know that the system found him entertaining. The following rules were not as clear-cut as the first one, and were instead made to encompass countless possible scenarios and races. The only thing that Lex could garner from going through thousands of those rules was that at least the system wasn't overtly against the system users. But that did not mean everything was so straightforward either. Lex had long suspected that the reason he always found himself in the heart of trouble had something to do with the system. After reading the countless rules that the system operated by, Lex could conclude that the system was at least partially responsible for it. It was not out of malicious intentions, but the rules did nudge the system to direct the user towards areas or activities with high entertainment possibilities. Learning this, Lex did not actually feel betrayed by the system. If anything, he was relieved. A big part of his suspicion was due to the fact that he could not understand why someone would make something as powerful as the Midnight Inn, and then just hand it to Lex. Now he knew that there was some twisted, probably devilishly handsome fellow, orchestrating the dispersal of systems and authoring all the things that were happening to Lex. Or, well, at least setting the bylaws that ultimately resulted in everything that happened. Knowing what the system wanted from him actually lowered the negativity he had gathered towards it. Now he just had to accept the fact that he was a source of entertainment for someone or something else. One day, you will dance to my tune, Lex could not help but say. He did not even know who he was saying it to. Whether it was his system, the system network, or whatever entity behind Lex, they had contributed greatly in his rise, even if he did like being treated like an entertainer. He accepted the grace of this favor without putting on airs. But that did not mean that one day, he could not use them for entertainment as well. Life was unpredictable, and he was now immortal. Barring murder, he would live for a very long time. He would see everything this life had to show him, taste all its flavors and feel the winds of destiny blow against his skin throughout the ages. Who knew where time would take him? He certainly didn't know. But if he could help it, he would certainly organize a play at least once, and have the creator of the system star in it for Lex's entertainment. But now was not the time for these lamentations and random thoughts. He made the change to the system rules, and felt the flow of time return to normal. He had harbored a hope that he would be able to change rules as long as the single minute did not elapse, but indeed it was limited to just a single change. Lex got up, ready to go to work, but paused. Deep within himself, he felt the system tremble, and saw that the process to change the rule was not as straightforward as he thought. Lex sat back down and began to focus on the system once more, observing how countless changes were being made to its aura. Maybe this would be useful for him in the future. Abruptly was slightly dissatisfied at the fact that Luther did not immediately present himself before the planet, but with the aura from that word continuously seeping into his soul as a reminder, he dared not do anything. Abruptly transformed into his human form just so that he could glare at Luther so that the pathetic human could understand the severity of Abruptly's anger, but Luther was looking down at his clipboard, so he did not see the glare at all. It wasn't effective in the slightest. The difficulty will be from mortal, all the way to the earth immortal realm, meaning that each of the 7 dungeons will have a different difficulty rating. The world wonders are generally safe, but a golden core cultivation is recommended, Abruptly said. Alright. Moving on, I got a message from the legal department asking what are your laws regarding lost and found property? If the guests who come to the inn find something there, will they be penalized for bringing it back? Keep in mind, this is separate from any material wealth they might harvest on their own during exploring dungeons. Lost and, do you think I am so petty? What do I care what they take with them? They are free to do as they please. The lands of Abruptly are filled with treasures. Luther looked at Abruptly like an emitter. Fill her with treasures? Sounds like an open invitation to get robbed. Luther remembered the days before when the inn had no policy about such things. The guests literally stole the dirt off the ground just because of how valuable it was. He could tell Abruptly was about to have a bad time, but it was not up to Luther to warn Abruptly. Granting him access to the guests of the inn was already doing him a massive favor. A quality assurance team from the Midnight Inn will be assembled to review your dungeon and world wonder to ensure they adhere to the standards of the inn before they are made open to the public. Luther began to speak, unaware he was giving Abruptly blood pressure issues. Although Abruptly had no blood, the pressure under the surface was quite a lot, and now it was rising even further. Chapter 1359 Sales Pitch. Lex ended up spending several days in meditation after watching the changes take place within his system. At first, he was merely interested since he found the change to be novel. But then his consciousness got drawn in, and Lex completely lost track of time and place. His mind drifted as he closed his eyes and ended up sitting cross-legged on the floor, absorbing everything he had seen. This was both a good thing and a bad thing for Lex. It was a good thing because he encountered a natural state of epiphany, falling into a meditative trance and qualitatively enhancing his understanding and application of laws as a whole. It was a bad thing because the moment he woke up from meditation, his growth was much too substantial to push back the tribulation anymore. Instead of making use of the tribulation rooms in the inn, Lex teleported over to the Temple of Fasting. Although the inn was equipped with the best facilities to help him, Lex's cultivation was too anomalous. He never knew when something might cause a mutation that attracted too much attention, or perhaps put a burden on the realm itself. The Temple of Fasting, in this case, was an excellent location, for its capability to hide was top-notch. It was nigh impossible for anyone outside to know what was happening inside, which was a good thing because now that months had passed since the inn was reconnected to the universe, a lot had changed. Initially, only one of the inn workers had become an immortal. Afterwards, the ongoing war kept everyone busy. But at the same time, it gave everyone the exposure and experience they needed to undergo qualitative growth. In summary, the number of Earth immortals working for the Midnight Inn were nearing 50 now, all of them experiencing their tribulations at the Temple of Fasting. Over the next 5 years, Lex expected that number to quadruple. We do not even need to change the rule itself. Indeed, with my new, in-depth understanding of the fundamentals of how the system operates, I believe I can provide the best possible solution to this conundrum. Mary appeared before Lex, wearing a black suit and a baby blue tie, looking like an amateur lawyer on their first case. The system states that as long as you don't ask it to break any rules, anything is negotiable. More importantly, it is also giving you a subtle warning that a lot of quests might be incoming your way soon. Not a problem, Lex said, waving his hand as if dealing with insignificant issues. On the surface, the system wants me to travel to each and every point it needs to connect to because it relies on me to form a connection to that place. In truth, it subtly uses these opportunities to push me towards numerous unexpected issues or possibly entertaining situations. Lex paused and gave Mary a pointed look, as if to let her know that he knew the truth now, before continuing. Yet as my cultivation level rises, the number of issues and events that can truly entice or intrigue me, or put me in awkward or entertaining situations will decrease correspondingly. As a result, spending days and weeks connecting the inn to planets where the strongest living being is weaker than me will hardly be entertaining. I propose the following amendment. To connect the inn to realms, minor realms, planets, and basically any points that can be connected to the inn, if the highest living being is weaker than me, then I can send a midnight tavern there instead of going there myself. The tavern will serve as an anchor point for the system. It will further push the agenda of making the inn itself more popular, it will speed things along, and provide the opportunity for entertainment through other characters and inn workers. Correspondingly, for places where beings exist in my own cultivation realm or stronger, I can go myself to connect them. It's really a best of both worlds situation. More importantly, the inn can continue to expand its reputation in a stable way, and give me an opportunity to balance things out a bit. After all, with at least one Tao Lord within the inn, no one can really claim I'm not in over my head. Now I need a fighting chance to survive, or the Midnight Inn and myself will lose all entertainment value. Chapter 1360 Tavern Tales I. It sounded a lot like a sales pitch, mostly because it was. Lex wasn't exaggerating when he said he had gained a deeper understanding of the system and how it works. Entertainment value aside, each system had a certain range, as far as he could tell, that the system monitors for news and interesting events so that the system can give quests. Many times, the quests themselves, or perhaps their rewards, would end up being exactly what the user needs to survive an upcoming disaster that is unknown to the user. This is because through various means, the system detected what was happening within its surveillance region, and reacted to it. Responding to things Lex said or did counted as a part of this, which explained why the system often reacted to things Lex said to it previously. Heck, Lex got the tavern by gaslighting the system into thinking any decent organization should have subsidiaries, and got the overpowered butter knife by belittling the system's defensive capabilities. Of course, this didn't always work, or else Lex's constant complaining about the teleportation would have been long addressed. If anything, the current tavern proves that sometimes, sending a tavern can be more entertaining than actually going by myself, said Lex as he suddenly grinned. His projection was, more or less, always at the Midnight Tavern. It was quite relaxing, and even fun. He'd been using the tavern for a long time, acting out his fantasy of being the secret, mysterious tavern keeper who slowly yet silently affects the trajectory of an entire country. Considering that his interference had saved countless lives, prevented numerous tragedies and improved the lives of the populace as a whole, he had no intentions of stopping. Of course, he never did anything himself. Instead, he always just guided his guests, but taking the final actions would be entirely up to them. The reason he was grinning was because something had happened in the inn which he was sure could be qualified to be called entertaining. It was not dangerous to the tavern, or put any of them at risk. But at least for the people involved it was quite dangerous, and filled with suspense and drama. But the forthright action moved the huntress's heart, so as soon as the fight ended, she picked up the buffoon and began returning to Barren City. By now she had entered the Chi training stage, and had become a well-known figure within the city. Even though her previous clan still caused problems for her now and again, with her own strength, and the guidance from a certain enigmatic tavern keeper, she had managed to survive. That is exactly why, instead of going to the hospital, the huntress brought the buffoon to the Midnight Tavern, which was always bustling whether it was day or night. The fact that their prices had not changed regardless of the food shortage, and that they never seemed to run out of food made it a popular place. It also helped that the tavern maids, the triplet sisters, were as beautiful as the sunrise, and the bartender was stunningly handsome. Combined with their excellent service and warm environment, the tavern was the most popular place in the city. Even so, when the huntress brought the bleeding, dying buffoon in, no one batted as much as an eye. "Oh dear, what do we have on our hands now?" Nami asked with a hint of an exasperation in her voice. The huntress did not have an older sister, but whenever Nami looked at her or scolded her, the huntress liked to imagine this is what the care of an older sister would feel like. It was because even when Nami, the barmaid, scolded the huntress, the guest of the tavern, the huntress never felt any distress or agitation. She only felt warmth. "A bumbling buffoon doing his best to die," the huntress said, and she allowed Big Ben to take the buffoon from her hands. "I'll see what I can do to ensure he fails in his endeavors," Nami said with a shaking head. "By the way, the tavern keeper is waiting for you on the roof." Of course he was waiting for her. The huntress shook her head, and began heading upstairs, completely unaware that she had brought in the escaped crown prince who was in hiding, and the new list of enemies she had suddenly made for herself. Chapter 1361 Tavern Tales 2. The huntress made her way to the rooftop just in time to watch an incredibly healthy, yes, that was the word for it. She saw an incredibly healthy man leave, his torso the shape of an olive, his weight rivaling that of a building. It was, in itself, a display of magic that the tavern didn't shatter under the weight of the man, or that he could fit in the corridor easily. In truth, there was a bit of size manipulation formation at work when the man entered the inn, but it happened so seamlessly that it was hard to pick up on. Was that the Sultan? The huntress asked in shock once the man had left. "I am not at liberty to reveal information about my other guests," the tavern keeper said casually, sipping a pina colada and wearing a t-shirt that read, "I just met the Sultan." The huntress looked at the t-shirt, then at Lex, and then back towards the tavern hallway through which the Sultan had left. "Do you think if I go chase after him, I can catch up to him?" she asked with genuine curiosity. The Sultan was famous across their whole world, equivalent to a rock star. Everyone loved him, and the man had no enemies to speak of. Legend has it that a hug from the Sultan could cure depression, and spending time in his company increased people's feeling of self-worth. The huntress had once heard the story that 3 countries once approached him separately with offers to simply hand him rule over their territories. Naturally, the Sultan did not agree. It was a testament to his popularity nevertheless. "I think, before you do anything else, you should worry a little about yourself," said the tavern keeper, looking out over the city. The sun was about to set, which painted the sky in orange and yellow, making the normally unbearable city look picturesque. "Is that it? Is there some hidden twist? I find it hard to believe that the first favor you asked me was so simple." The tavern keeper shrugged. "You know, I'm not in the habit of leaving the tavern myself, or else I would just go ahead and send the coupon on my own. You just need to give the kid the coupon and you're done. There's no hidden trap in this quest." "Fine," she said, grabbing the coupon and heading out, ignoring the blood that still stained her clothes. Compared to blood stains, it was the unknown problems coming towards her that annoyed her. The favor wasn't difficult to begin with, and even if there were a few unexpected issues, she'd deal with it. Yet it turned out, the task was simple. Just as the tavern keeper said, she spotted the child in the middle of a fight, fighting alone against a group of others, and getting beaten up pretty badly. If there was any redeeming factor, it was that he was toughing it out and still fighting hard. But she dispersed the fight as soon as she arrived on the scene, taking the blonde kid away from the groups, and then handing him a coupon. He felt concerned about it, but it wasn't like there was anything she was doing to harm him, so he cautiously took the coupon. By the time the huntress returned, barely 20 minutes had passed, but the whole aura around the tavern had changed. As soon as she entered, the conversation in the group hushed, and everyone looked at her as if she was some kind of freak. Every single person was looking at her, and that was not normal at all. Her senses as a huntress started to tingle, and she started to feel like she was in immense trouble. Without anyone prompting her, she made her way to the rooftop to find the buffoon sitting there already, looking completely confused and bewildered, just like a buffoon. Chapter 1362 Tavern Tales 3. "You've returned quicker than I anticipated," the tavern keeper said with a smile, but the huntress was not exactly in the mood to play games. "What's happening? Why was everyone looking at me like that?" she asked, ignoring the confused buffoon who seemed even more confused upon seeing her. "Ah, that. Well, you see, shortly after you left, the most peculiar set of rumors started going about. One of them said that a wild huntress was seen carrying around the corpse of the crown prince across town, while another rumor said that there was a valiant warrior princess who carried the crown prince out of the jaws of death, saving him from a team of following assassins, and brought him to the city to get treated from his injuries. Both of them agree that the person being carried was the crown prince though." Instead of asking the tavern keeper why he knew these rumors if he never left the inn, the huntress looked towards the buffoon with bewilderment. "He's the crown prince?" she asked incredulously. "Wait till you hear his story of how he ended up in the forest. You'll really begin to think the turtle buffoon is more fitting than anything else." "Hey, that's not fair. You shouldn't talk about me like that," the buffoon said, sounding slightly offended. "I have feelings too, you know." The huntress looked at the buffoon, feeling a sense of bewilderment. But she suppressed everything she was feeling and looked towards the tavern keeper. "How can I fix this?" she asked directly. "Young lady, I do not know why you think that I would know anything about how to deal with such a sensitive situation. I am a mere humble tavern keeper. It was almost impossible to find nascent soul cultivators on this planet. There was probably only 1 or 2 alive, hiding deep within their lairs, far away from society and the mundane world. You know, it's quite rude to eavesdrop on others' conversations." Lex set out into the open, and a seemingly invisible ghost near him suddenly turned visible. The ghost was startled at being revealed, and looked towards Lex with immense shock, followed by confusion. "Who are you?" the ghost asked. "Me? I'm just a tavern keeper, looking after my tavern. It's not easy to do, you know. There's a certain provision in this country's law that increases the tax I have to pay on the food I serve during a famine. Can you believe that? It's almost as if whoever wrote that law expected taverns to hoard food and supplies or something. The ghost, for some odd reason, seemed embarrassed. But, as a ghost, he could not blush, so no one would ever know. "Anyway, don't mind me," Lex said. "I don't mean to keep you here. I just wanted to let you know not to spy on my guests, it's quite rude. That would be like if I spied on you and discovered that you're hiding in a locket being worn by someone who shares the bloodline of the ruling sovereign of this country and illegitimate heir for the king, one might say. It's fortunate, then, that I don't do such things, don't you think? Otherwise I might go ahead and suggest that you help the existing crown prince by having the illegitimate heir swap places with him, thus becoming legitimate. Now that kind of high suspense, intense drama would probably keep someone on the edge of their seats, watching the progress at each turn and obstacle. But, like I said, I don't spy on people, so I won't suggest something like that. Such a shame, though. That would have made for an interesting story to watch." After a few moments of silence, the ghost sighed, and bowed to Lex. "Thank you for not spying," the ghost said humbly. "I will avoid doing the same in the future, especially in places like the Chamber of Commerce. I'm glad you understand. Before you leave, might I recommend you try having Ron make you a drink? You won't regret it." "The kid doesn't drink," the ghost replied. "I never said anything about the kid. I said you should try one of those drinks." Chapter 1363. She thought he was growing up. Sitting in his office, Lex knew that the system was aware of everything happening within the tavern. In fact, it had to. After all, the tavern was also a part of the system. At the same time, Lex not only proved himself a sufficiently competent tavern owner, but a skilled storyteller as well. By only subtly and indirectly influencing events happening in and around the tavern, he became merely a side character, albeit an important one. That meant the potential for the taverns to produce interesting stories was great. It could generate more than enough entertainment on its own. In fact, it could even set up the inn to become an even more entertaining place. He could imagine it now. A cultivator from some remote, one-star planet overcomes a lifetime of obstacles, escaping and evading death to succeed by a hair's breadth. Throughout his journey, a single, unassuming tavern had been of critical importance. Sometimes it provided him with safety and security. Other times, it was a place where he gained inspiration. On a few occasions, it even served as a refuge to hide from his enemies. But at last, he succeeded in his life's goals, became the strongest on the planet, and had nothing more to pursue. Such a scenario might seem far-fetched, but the truth was that the number of unconnected, secluded one-star planets in the Origin realm was greater than those connected to the Henali network, and the realm as a whole. This meant that the story of a single cultivator becoming the strongest on his planet, and then reaching the end of his journey since he had no access to greater resources or cultivation techniques, was far more common than anyone would believe. How entertaining would it be if such a person suddenly visited the tavern once more, and through it gained access to a mysterious, mystical inn, filled with the purest form of energy available, entities far stronger than anything that they ever imagined, and a whole new horizon to discover. It was the perfect setup for countless novels, and though Lex did not actually expect any of such guests to become universe-dominating geniuses, the possibility of it was still exciting. Even though Lex could split his attention into hundreds of different tasks by now, he focused a majority of his mind into this elaborate designing software, and began to consider the complicated terrains his tavern would be placed in, the kind of materials he would need to build it, the layout it would have, and how many layers of secret underground bases and hidden rooms behind moving bookshelves he should make. The first idea he had was to build a tavern in a giant treehouse. This tavern would fit in well on worlds with cultures and societies based around trees, and would work well with certain races such as elves and druids. But an old, ancient castle with an unknown history and deep lore also appealed to Lex on an underlying level. It was difficult to decide, so he built both the massive tree house as well as the castle, and connected them. But, somehow, Lex felt like it just lacked a certain something. So he built a moat around the castle and filled it with lava. There was nothing like a good, welcoming tavern surrounded by a lava moat. But as he stared at the moat, Lex got another idea. Why did the tavern have to be a traditional building? Why couldn't he make a ship, or a cruise and turn that into a tavern. Or maybe it could be a train, or a blimp. The longer Lex spent interacting with the highly sophisticated designing software, which was in no way just a game, the more new and interesting ideas started to come to Lex. He just needed to decide which one of these. Oh wait, an underwater tavern made entirely of glass. Lex started designing that one as well, allowing his creativity to flow through him freely. Mary's projection appeared in the air beside Lex, and just shook her head as she saw the massive grin on his face. Just when she thought he was growing up. Chapter 1364. A long time. Lex spent quite a lot of time playing designing his next tavern on Minecraft. But he could not shirk his duties either, since this was his inn, so Lex relied on a very basic cloning technique he had mastered. His clones would have a fraction of his strength, and could not go too far from his main body. In fact, their range was limited to the extent of Lex's spirit sense, which was actually quite massive. But, considering his connection and awareness to the entire realm, his clones could go anywhere within the realm itself. As such, it was no problem having them accompany Ripley as he continued to audit the inn. Lately, he had been going over the roles of the various staff members and the divisions, looking for inefficiencies or redundancies. In this matter, at least, Lex was confident the inn would perform well. With only a few 100,000 staff members dealing with millions of guests every day, it was impossible to not have the most efficient system in place. The system helped a lot, yes. But that did not mean that the workers themselves were incompetent. There were other things across the inn that also required his attention, yet nothing so serious that a clone couldn't handle it. Despite appearances, Lex took the future development of his system very seriously. He was new to the immortal realm, so his understanding of how to cater to immortals was superficial. But he had been immortal for most of his life, and knew very well how to take care of them. Only once he was completely satisfied with what the inn could offer mortals, and he himself was strong enough, would he start dealing with immortals. This was, of course, assuming nothing else unexpected happened. With that thought, he finally settled on building a treehouse tavern. Lex had no intention of doing things lightly, so the first thing he did was go to the Midnight Library, which by now was filled with billions of books. The number of techniques it had up to the golden core level was astounding, and a decent collection of nascent level techniques had also been gathered. There were a few Earth Immortal level techniques, but they weren't really available to be viewed by the public, as Lex had personally set up restrictions for them. After all those techniques had been collected from the Temple of Fasting. Besides just cultivation techniques, the library contained a vast reserve of knowledge on various topics within the cultivation world, and that's exactly what Lex needed now. The first, most important thing to decide would be the kind of tree to use to grow the tree for the treehouse. The idea seemed insane considering the time it took for a tree to grow. It would take years for Lex to complete the treehouse. That is the kind of thinking of a mortal, and as an immortal Lex did not subscribe to it. Instead, he was a follower of the thought process that cultivation magic would solve all his problems. Also, the Midnight Realm itself had certain laws associated with growing trees, a result of the heavenly tree dominating an entire continent for a long time. He was sure he could figure something out. There were thousands of books and reading material to go through, so this would take a long time. Fortunately, due to his increased speed as an immortal, a long time actually meant like 7 minutes. He flipped the book in front of him shut with his decision made. He would use a void sequoia tree. Chapter 1365. Tuition Fee. Voidwood was one of the toughest known, renewable substances in the universe. Depending on the exact variety of the tree, the toughness would be even greater, not to mention that the trees themselves have many amazing properties. A void sequoia tree was by no means the strongest of such trees, but it definitely was one of the strongest. More importantly, it was absolutely massive in both height and width, making it a great option for a treehouse. The many space and void-related properties of the tree itself also made it an excellent option. Now that he had made the selection, Lex was faced with 2 more problems. The first was that he had to get his hands on a seed for the void sequoia tree, and secondly he had to learn how to rapidly nurture it. He was not referring to the ordinary means of nurturing, no, he meant the kind of nurturing that everyone thought was impossible, since he was in the business of doing impossible things anyway. He already had an idea for how to do both of those things. He needed to only put in an order for the seed at the Emporium, and Powell would take care of the rest. The nurturing he would learn from the sovereign. Just because the quest said he had to build it with his own hands, it did not mean that he couldn't learn from others. With the plan decided, Lex directly went to the Emporium ready to order, but discovered that Powell was in a particularly good mood that day, even humming a song as he stared out into the distance. "Looks like someone's having a good time," Lex said with a smile. Powell looked over to Lex, and grinned even wider. "You have no idea. Recently, the Emporium secured a meeting with the Versailles Bank. With their funding, the Emporium is going to break through the limits of a single realm, and begin selling in another realm. This is a big step for a business. If the venture succeeds, the Emporium will be one step closer to living up to its name." "Ah, congratulations. Do you know what other realm you're going to be entering?" Although, with the turtle, there was bound to be some kind of drama anyway. After a few deep breaths, Lex teleported to the turtle, who was still making preparations for his garden which would eventually become a heaven. "How are things going?" Lex asked, walking up to him. "Any progress with the heaven project?" "I talked to the innkeeper, and he said it might not be a bad idea to make both heaven and hell within the inn." The turtle paused, and looked towards Lex. "I still have an issue with getting enough divine energy for my plants," the turtle said. "Maybe if you can get me some angels to help along with that, I can work towards tending my garden. As for hell, I cannot help you with that." Lex nodded, more or less already expecting such an answer. "Rather than angels, I think you can consider working with fairies. Their fairy dust can be very useful, and can turn into more or less any kind of energy they wish. They can not only help you mimic divine energy, but any other kind of energy you wish for as well." The turtle paused, as if considering Lex's words. After a while, he turned to look at Lex, and patted him on the head with his vine. "Looks like humans are not so silly after all," was all he said before turning to once again continue his work. "Yeah, speaking of being silly," Lex said, walking up closer. "I need to learn how to plant and grow a strong, healthy void sequoia tree in a very short amount of time. Can you provide me with any guidance?" This time, the turtle paused entirely, and turned to study Lex seriously. He did not speak for a short time, but eventually he nodded and said, "I can teach you, but I require a tuition fee." "Sure, what is it?" Lex asked, though he was surprised that the turtle was interested in such a thing. Chapter 1366 Tuition Fee 2. "I will teach you how to grow a void sequoia tree, but not an ordinary one. I will teach you how to grow a rarer, more ancient variant called void stabilization sequoia tree, and from that I will require some sap and its first seed. That will be the payment after the fact. Before that, I will require a Genesis oak seed and an eternal autumn persimmon seed. When you have both, I will teach you what you need." Lex was unfamiliar with the void stabilization sequoia tree, as well as the others mentioned by the turtle. Even though he had recently done a lot of research on trees, it made sense that information on rarer species was not so easily available. Since the turtle knew about them, they must exist. He was curious about them though. "I'll see if I can get my hands on them, though I'll admit I've never heard of them before. Can you tell me a bit about them? That might help me find them. The seeds I've asked you for are only the ordinary versions of these trees, so finding them should not be impossible. I will raise all 3 seeds within this realm so that the growth of the realm can be better regulated." Oh man, Lex really needed to talk to the turtle more often. What did it mean it was trying to regulate the growth of his realm? "Oh, what are you planning on doing to the realm?" Lex asked, suppressing his concern. "Got it," said Lex, making a mental note to learn more about realms and their life cycles. With that, he returned to the Emporium a lot quicker than he was expecting to. A couple of additional orders should not have been too much of an issue, yet when he returned, he saw a very troubled-looking Powell waiting for him. "What happened?" "Are you okay?" Lex asked. Just a short while ago, he was humming with joy, and now he looked like he swallowed a raw potato. There has been some progress on your commission, but the situation has developed in an unexpected fashion. Do you recall Madame Zuriadissa? You once conducted a trade with her through the Emporium. Yes, I remember her, Lex said. It was hard to forget someone like that, and not just because she had appeared in front of Lex in the guise of a mature, yet devastatingly beautiful woman. No, she was a very powerful celestial immortal who had her clones spread out across the Origin realm, and even in the Midnight realm. She might even have her clones in other realms entirely. Lex would not easily forget someone as formidable as that. There was also the fact that she had started her journey as a mere four-leaf clover. Well, it seems she has a very close relationship with the void sequoia tree forest, and no one can gain entry without her approval. On the plus side, getting a seed is much easier now. All one needs to do is ask her for it directly. But Madame Zuri has refused all trade offers, and instead insists that if you wish to get the seed, you must meet with her personally. Lex frowned, but did not find the request unusual. Even the last time he traded with her, she requested to meet him in person. It's not a problem. Can you arrange for me to meet with her? Chapter 1367 Meeting. That's the troublesome part, Powell said, looking incredibly awkward. We reached out to Zuri to set up the meeting, but she responded with a simple message. She is waiting for you in the cottage atop the peak of the Midnight Mountain. Lex paused, and frowned for the briefest of moments before turning normal once again. Excellent. I will go talk to her and see what can be done. Don't worry, if a deal is struck, I will give the Emporium a commission for setting this up. I also need a couple of other seeds. Shall I place the order with you now? Powell shook his head in embarrassment. Please, we cannot accept any payment for a failed commission on our behalf. Furthermore, for any seeds you require, Zuri might be a better source than us. Our integrity does not allow us to make gains where we failed to deliver on our promise. Lex merely nodded, applauding the Emporium's high moral standard, before turning to leave. His attention, now, was on Zuri. The way in which she had sent the message, and was already waiting for him at the inn carried a hint of a plot. It was as if she already knew everything Lex wanted, and was just waiting for him. But the problem was, he could not see how she could have spied on Lex, as he would have noticed. Or, perhaps, considering that she was in the celestial realm, she had a way to observe him without him detecting. But since she was already waiting for him at the inn, he would go and meet with her. He wanted to see what this was all about. It seems to me that in just 1 year, the number of monumental events you face are more than most people face in a century. Like I said, I've lived a tumultuous life. It's quite strange, I never noticed any of these clones of yours that you're mentioning. Zuri laughed and stood up. If my clones were so easy to detect, then I would have done a very bad job with them. Their whole purpose is to be concealed. Through them, I have seen much of the Origin realm. Perhaps, I have seen too many things that I was not supposed to see. But let's put this matter aside for now. I've heard you want a seed. It just so happens, I have the seed you want. What will you pay me for it? Is there something special you need? Lex asked. I know it is a celestial level ingredient, and ordinary currency cannot exactly be used to pay for it. Zuri turned and studied Lex, looking at him deeply. She knew things about him that he probably had not realized she knew. That gave her a slight advantage if they were to end up in some kind of negotiation. But the fact of the matter was, she had a very mature understanding of humans, and based on that, she could judge Lex's personality as well. Being direct would be much more useful than anything else. Do you remember the request I made of you last time we met? She asked. You wanted me to ask the sovereign turtle if it wanted to come to you. I asked, and it was not interested. Naturally, it would not be interested. The things the Innkeeper can offer, naturally I cannot. But that does not mean that another arrangement cannot be drawn up. I require the turtle's assistance on some matters. If you can negotiate with it on my behalf, I will give you the seed you want. Chapter 1368 Karma. That Zuri wanted the turtle's help was not so surprising. She had once tried to recruit the turtle, when the inn was much smaller in size. Her pitch back then was that she could provide a much larger gardening space for the turtle than the inn. Now that the inn had grown into its own realm entirely, that was no longer feasible. More importantly, Zuri had quite a bit of confidence in herself. Even back then, she dared to try and poach from the innkeeper, with the excuse that she knew that the amiable personality of the innkeeper meant he would not take offense to anything she did in an upright and fair manner. Now, although she was not poaching from the innkeeper, the shady way in which she arranged this meeting with Lex left him feeling like she was being spied on. Moreover, she was even meeting him within the Midnight Inn. Though she had been straightforward in her request, and had not requested anything absurd, Lex had the feeling that there was more to Zuri than met the eye. Moreover, he felt like she was trying to indirectly communicate something to him through her antics, but he could not discover what it was. The last time we met, as a token of my appreciation for your efforts, I gave you a bit of a warning. There was an impurity within you that would have affected your path. Indeed, Zuri was the first person to detect the inscriptions hidden within Lex. Even the system, while checking his condition, had not mentioned them, mostly because they harmonized with him in such a way that they were no direct or immediate threat. This time, let me extend the gesture once more. Zuri's emerald green eyes suddenly shone with a quiet intensity, and within her gaze, Lex felt something he had not felt before, at least within the inn. He felt like all his secrets were being laid bare before her. Yet karma in the cultivation world was a lot more esoteric and obscure. Its complexities were such that even Lex, with the ability of his eye to help him comprehend laws, could not begin to understand its complex nature. Regardless, now that he was aware of it, he would try to address the situation. But the thing was that now, he had even more karma with Zuri. Well, he didn't understand karma. All he knew was that she helped him, so he would help her back. It was simple, straightforward, and aligned with his consciousness. Doing something just because he might be reacting to karma sown by someone was not his style of doing things. Thank you for your advice. I will address the issue as soon as I can. Please, let me know what you want the turtle to do and I will try to negotiate on your behalf. But I can only try, I cannot make the turtle do anything it does not wish to do. I completely understand, Zuri said with a nod. I have reached a bottleneck in my cultivation, and cannot find a path forward. But the turtle will have excellent insight into all plants. I wish for him to take a look at my true body, and discern how I can continue to grow stronger. Can your true body come to the inn? He asked, sensing that seeing the true body might not actually be so easy. It can, but the departure of my true body from the origin realm will cause certain problems. The turtle will need to come and see my true body in person, in the origin realm. Yeah, that was not suspicious at all. I will see what I can do, said Lex. Unfortunately, unless he decided to change his mind about the tree, this was something he had to do. Chapter 1369 Old Legends. Lex did not immediately head to the turtle. This issue was particularly sensitive. He did not want the turtle to leave the safety of the inn, especially with Zuri acting so suspiciously. Her offering Lex some genuine aid did not alleviate his suspicions, but just made him even more confused about the nature of what she was planning. There was, of course, the possibility that there was no plot and she was sincere. But it was hard to believe, and he didn't want to risk something so major on a mere possibility. The solution was simple. All he needed to do was give up on his plan. He could use some other tree to build the treehouse, or decide to build a castle instead. Things did not need to be so complicated. Yet Lex could resign himself to giving up just because the situation became complicated or troublesome. What king of supremacy did he have if he dared not display it when there was trouble? His decision was basically made, so he teleported over to the turtle, who for once was not farming. Instead, he was resting under the shade of a large tree, using its vines to scratch the belly of Little Blue, who was floating around the turtle with its eyes closed. The sight was cozy and comfortable, and Lex did not want to disturb them, yet he had to. I have a situation. I have a lead on getting you seeds for the trees you want, but the seed for the void sequoia tree I need for your tuition to be relevant to begin with is suddenly out of reach. to get it, I will require your help. Oh, no one will harm you, of that even I can assure you. But I just wanted to let you know about that fact lest you want to retain your anonymity. Thank you for the warning, and see you soon, Lex said as he used the 4-leaf clover to purchase a ticket to that very planet. Without hesitation he used the ticket, being teleported away while having a random thought. He was teleporting to the main body of a 4-leaf clover in the celestial level to help it break through its bottleneck, to get his hands on a few seeds, to be able to plant and grow a tree quickly, so he could build a treehouse around it, so he could build a tavern and complete a quest in the hopes that he would not need to personally travel to every single planet he wished to connect to the inn. He was on a quest, within a quest, within a quest and so on for 5 layers or more. He really needed to get an assistant. Oh wait, his assistant was helping connect the inn to a number of dungeons. Right. He needed another assistant. Lex and the turtle teleported away, arriving on a new planet that immediately felt like its star rating could rival Dunya. That meant this was at least a 5-star planet. All around him was a thick, luscious forest that seemed to extend to eternity with an exceptionally rich biodiversity. In fact, many creatures around them were earth immortals or heavenly immortals. Lex was about to take in a deep breath, appreciating the freshness of the air, when he suddenly felt something. He was being watched by a very strong entity, and it wasn't Zuri. As he looked up, Lex did not see a regular sky. Instead he saw a rainbow so massive it filled the entire sky itself, carrying with it a weight and depth that was abnormal. It was as if he was sitting under the weight of all the rainbows in existence. At the end of the rainbow, the turtle muttered, giving Lex a very bad feeling as he recalled some legends from back on Earth. Chapter 1370 A Prison. The feeling of being watched did not last long, and faded, as if it lost interest. Why wouldn't it? Based on all appearances, both Lex and the turtle were in the mortal realm. Because that completely made sense. It was a very common thing for mortals to teleport on an interstellar scale without suffering any harm. Why wouldn't they? It was not as if their physiques were so weak that the pressures of such travel would destroy them. Sarcasm aside, mortals really could travel the universe as long as they used the golden keys of the inn. Yet others could not know that. Such an obvious loophole should have aroused greater suspicion from anyone scrutinizing them, yet since the turtle wished for his camouflage to be perfect, it was, and mere mortals could not see through it, or even conceive the idea that there was something amiss. This was only the first step in the turtle's plan. Lex, on the other hand, viewed the interface to see the details of the planet they had teleported to. Planet, Zuri. Planet rating, 5.5 star. Planet environment, extremely fertile, extremely hungry, extremely dangerous. Planet galaxy, Adissa. Lex froze, blinked, and read again. The planet was Zuri, and the galaxy was Adissa. Either the clover he was familiar with took her name arbitrarily, or her existence and influence was closely connected to the entire galaxy. Eventually, they reached the base of the valley. Lex did not know what to expect, but he certainly wasn't expecting a simple meadow. There were no grand structures, no towering trees, no ancient glories. Just a simple meadow with a few fruit trees here and there, and wildflowers all around. The turtle hummed, as if appreciating the place, though Lex was utterly incapable of determining what was so special about this place. It seemed like any other meadow. Then again, the very fact that he could not see through it revealed just how special it really was. The path continued under their feet, so they continued walking, all the way to the center of the meadow, where Lex saw something unbelievable. Right in the middle was a small, inconsequential 4-leaf clover, looking no different from any other clover he had ever seen. If all signs had not been pointing towards the fact that this was Zuri, he would not have believed that such a small thing could be a celestial immortal. Didn't all things grow bigger and grander as their cultivation developed? Welcome, Zuri spoke into their minds, her voice soft and gentle. You are the first beings to see me in person in a very long time. It feels very different to be able to see people in person, and not through a clone. Silly clover, the turtle said with gentleness in his voice Lex had never heard before. Plants are meant to grow in a garden, not in a prison. A thought flashed through Lex's mind, and he looked up. Though the mist still blocked his view, he could still recall what the sky above looked like. An endless rainbow covered the sky, from horizon to horizon, and though it looked beautiful, it also felt suffocating. Who the hell was holding Zuriadissa, a celestial immortal, prisoner? Could it be a Tao Lord?